SQL, Python, and dashboards are great, but the skill that'll really make you stand out as a data analyst? Data storytelling. In today's video, we're going over what data storytelling is, why it's important, and some data storytelling tips. First, what is data storytelling? Data storytelling is crafting a narrative around your data. You're giving context and explaining why insights matter. You're explaining the so what about the data. Here's an example of data storytelling. Let's say that you're presenting a line chart that shows the number of website outage reports over time. The line chart also shows website traffic over time. And as you look at the line chart, you notice that outage reports spike in the evening, right around the time that website traffic spikes. That's a signal that traffic surges may be overwhelming the servers. This suggests that since more people are accessing the website in the evening, maybe the website owners need to scale up compute resources in the evening to avoid these website outage reports. From this analysis, a great next step would be to confirm this insight by looking at the website logs. In this data story, you can see that we didn't just talk about the numbers of website crashes and website traffic. Rather, this story was told to help explain why the numbers matter and what the numbers actually mean for the stakeholder. Every data story has three parts: the data, the visualizations, and the narrative. The data is the part that you are probably most familiar and most comfortable with. This is the actual analysis, the actual numbers. In our example, our data would be a table with the time, the number of outages reported, and the number of people accessing the website. Of course, when you tell a story with data, it's really important that you also address where the data came from and any limitations that the data may have. Being transparent about where the data came from and addressing any limitations or issues that you found in the data is crucial in order for your analysis and your data story to have credibility. The next part is visualizations. These are just the charts that illustrate or visualize the data. And in our case, it's the line chart that shows website usage and outage reports over time. And finally, the narrative is the actual story in the data. So part of our narrative is that website crashes increase in the evening, let's say around 6 p.m., at the same time that the traffic to the website increases. Now, a good narrative has a simple structure. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning sets the problem. What were you tasked with solving? What question were you tasked with answering? The beginning is also a great place to mention where the data came from and any limitations that there may be in the data or in your analysis. The middle shows what you investigated and how you investigated it. And the end delivers an insight or a recommendation that ideally answers the question you asked at the beginning, or gives some steps or suggestions as to how to solve the problem that you mentioned in the beginning. So for our example data story, here would be the full narrative. The web support team noticed that they were getting a lot of support requests and they wanted to know what some root causes may be and if there's ways to better support the website. So we as the data team collected data about web usage and looked to see if there were certain customers that report more outages or if there were certain times that outages happened more than others. And what we found was that most support requests came in around 6 p.m. This is where we'd show the line chart, by the way. We also found that this is right after we get a spike in traffic to the website. Now, these trends suggest that the spike in website traffic may be causing some of the support issues. Therefore, our recommendation is to confirm this data by looking at the website logs, and if data is confirmed, we would recommend increasing server resources to the website in the evening when the traffic increases. Now, you may be wondering, why is data storytelling that important? I mean, can't I just give the stakeholder a table that contains all these numbers? And the thing is, you can, but that would put a lot of responsibility and honestly work on the stakeholder to look through the numbers and interpret and analyze it themselves to understand what the data means. With your data analysis, if you can tell a story with the data and explain how the insights in your analysis affect the business or affect the people that work for the business, the stakeholder is much more likely to actually take action on what your data analysis uncovered and what your data analysis recommends. And that impact is what makes you stand out as a data analyst. Now, I know that sounds really straightforward, like be good at data storytelling, have a big impact, and you'll be a great data analyst. And yes, technically that is kind of the steps on how you would do that. But the thing is, unfortunately, data storytelling and getting really good at it is one of the hardest things about being a data analyst. At least for me, it's a skill that I'm still trying to master and still trying to be better at. So I did want to share some tips that I found to be helpful with data storytelling that if you're still kind of beginning your journey into data analysis, I think could help you as well. The first tip is that your data storytelling should have like 1 to 3 main ideas or main insights. If you think back to when you were in English class in high school, do you remember reading a story or reading an essay and your teacher would ask you, what's the main idea? That's a good question to ask yourself about your data story. What is the main thing you're trying to convey through your story? Once you have that, then any visualizations or subpoints you make should support that main idea. The second tip is that a picture is worth 1,000 words. If you can illustrate a data insight through a visualization, definitely do it. Now, that doesn't mean just add a visualization to your story just to add a visualization. You should make sure that it's a compelling visualization and it's the right visualization to convey your point. For example, in our data story, a bar chart would probably be a little bit less compelling than the line chart that we actually used. The third tip I have is to remember your audience. As a data analyst, you might be presenting to different kinds of stakeholders, and who you're presenting to will determine what you focus on in your data analysis and what type of language you use. For example, if you're presenting to more technical stakeholders, you may spend a little bit more time on the how of the data analysis. How did you collect the data? What Python functions did you use? What were the details of the statistical techniques you used? To this audience, you may be able to use a little bit more technical jargon. However, if you're presenting to business stakeholders, it's much better to focus on that so what about the data analysis, to focus on the recommendation and the impact to the business that your data analysis found. And finally, my last tip is that you should always end your data story with either a recommendation or the answer to the question you posed at the beginning of your story, or with some kind of next steps. If you're like me, when you listen to a presentation, the things you probably remember are the things that someone said at the beginning of the presentation or at the end of the presentation. So I really like to put the important things or the things that I want the stakeholders to remember at the beginning or at the end of the data story. And putting the recommendation at the end of the data story not only makes it more memorable for the stakeholder, but it also makes it more actionable for the stakeholder. They know exactly what they would need to do next if they were taking your data analysis under consideration. So those are the basics of data storytelling, the skill that will take you from a good data analyst to a great data analyst. If this video helped you understand the concept a little bit more, let me know by leaving a comment and liking and sharing this video. And if you like data analytics content, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.